today's tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to render a list of items from an API endpoint. You will learn how to make an HTTP request using the Fetch API and learn the basic of a native JavaScript promise. Now, before we begin our tutorial, let's first learn about the Fetch API and what exactly our promise is. So, according to MDN, the Fetch API is a simple interface for fetching resources. Fetch allows to make network requests and handle responses easier than our old friend XML HTTP requests, also known as XHR. One of the main differences between XHR and Fetch API is that Fetch API uses promises, which provides a way to avoid callback hell and boilerplate heavy code that XHR uses. The fetch function takes one mandatory argument, which is the path to the resource you want to fetch, and returns a promise that resolves to the response of that request. You might be asking, what are promises? Promises, according to MDN, the promise object represents the eventual completion or failure of an async operation and its resulting values. Now, promises provides a simpler alternative to executing, composing, and managing async operations compared to the traditional callback-based approach. When working with promises, we always must be aware of what's its current state. There are three states: pending, fulfilled, and rejected. When a promise is pending, it can transition into either fulfilled or rejected. Once a promise transitions to either fulfilled or rejected, it cannot transition to any other state and its value will not change as well. When a promise is fulfilled, this means the async operation has completed and the promise has a value. When a promise is rejected, this means the async operation has failed and the promise will never be fulfilled. The MDA document also has a nice graph explaining what I just mentioned. Now, how can we use promises and Fetch API in order to render something? So we will now work on a simple example using these two concepts in order to render a list containing the data from an API endpoint. We'll be using a public API that contains information from one of my favorites, animation studio called Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli is a Japanese animation studio headquartered in Tokyo. The studio is known for animated feature films and also has produced a lot of silver shorts and famous commercials. We'll be using the people resource here that shows people of Studio Ghibli, which is mostly characters in the movies. This has attributes such as name, gender, age, species, what films they might be a part of, and so on. So in order for us to start this, let's create a simple index HTML that contains some basic information in order for us just to render a page. So open up your favorite editor and let's create a new file called index.html, and let's make sure to open it up by reviewing Finder and open up the page, and we have nothing here. Cool. So let's just add some basic boilerplate here for our HTML, and we'll create a title, and inside this we'll name it Studio Ghibli, and then oops, sorry, we actually need to put this in our head. There we go, and we'll add the title in there. Great. And now we need a body. Inside of body, we'll have a header called Studio Ghibli characters. And we'll have a div. The purpose of this div will be for us to render those characters through JavaScript. And inside of our JavaScript, we will have the render call as well. And this is our JavaScript file here that we'll be creating. Now, if we refresh our web page, you'll see the header Studio Ghibli characters, and you'll get this error because we haven't created our index.js file. But let's go on and create our file here. Perfect. And if we refresh, We shouldn't see that error anymore. So let's write down the steps that we're going to take. We want to fetch Studio Ghibli character names, and we want to append character their names to main element. All right, so in order for us to start, let's now create our fetch promise. So what we could do here is we could use fetch, and we'll use the resource, which is people here. And let's see what we get if we actually if we console log this fetch promise. If we return back here and we refresh, see now we get pending. So when we're making the HTTP request as an async operation, fetch will not return any data. It will return this response promise. When we log the response, it will show this promise in its pending state. This means that the HTTP response was just not expecting, we were expecting we'll get back eventually. But at the time of logging, this response was just not ready to be logged. Our promise is in pending state. It can now transition either into fulfilled or rejected. So let's let's actually resolve this fetch promise. And a way to do that is let's use fetch promise dot then response and response, and we'll return let's actually console log the response here. Oops, this is wrong. There we go. Great, so now we have this response object, and it has the headers, and it has okay, the status 200 means that this actually resolved. It shows the URL is coming from. So it shows that it's fulfilled, and we're logging the response, but we want more information than this. So now that we know our API response is working, we want to move on and actually get the body of the response. We want to call the JSON method on this response in order for us to get a JSON format. This operation is async, so the JSON method is actually returning another promise. So we will need to create a promise chain here. So what we do is here, we're going to return response.json, and then we do another here, then, and we'll do people, and we want to console log people. Great. So once we refresh our page and we check the log, we will now see an object with many keys that contain attributes of people in Studio Ghibli films. So we're one step closer to what we want to show. So as you can see, the object returns is a good chunk of information. For the sake of this guide, we will only focus again on showing the person's names. So let's transform this object of people and only return names. A way to do that is to use the map function, and after we map, we want to then join together each name with a new line. So here, instead of console log people, we're going to say console log names, and we'll create a variable called names, and we'll map here. We'll name this person, and we want to return let's see, person.name. Okay, so if we refresh, we still have an array of all the people's name, but like I mentioned, we want to join this whole array and just have the names in new lines. So in here, we'll do join, and we'll pass in the argument of a new line. If we refresh, now we have all the new line. So this is a great milestone. We're now logging some names, but how can we render this list of names in this side instead of our console? So if we take a look again on our HTML file, we have this div here with an ID of main. So in order for us to render the list of names, we will target our main ID from our HTML and append the list of names we fetch. To do this, we will use the HTML property called inner HTML, and this inner HTML element property allows us to set HTML inside of an HTML element, which is what we're going to do. All right, so let's now, before all this, or maybe, yes, here, let's target main element. So in order for us to do that, we will create a new variable called main, and we'll do document get element by ID called main. Okay, so now instead of us doing console log names here, we'll now do main inner HTML equal names. So if we refresh our page, all our names is here. But if you notice, this is just one single line. It's not what we wanted. So if we look at our elements, it's just a string of all the names joined together. But that's not what we want. We want to, we can't tell how many people are in this list. So what is exactly the issue? We appended a list of names, but the browser doesn't know how to deal with the string of names other than rendering it in one big line. We're missing some markup in order for our list of names to actually look like a list. So let's do some improvements here in order for us to render a list. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to move a lot of this information into a function called list of names, which will take the people here object, and we will also use some, we will interpolate some markup in order to show that each person belongs to a list item. Our list of names will return an unordered list of our names. So let's here append character names to main element. We will create list of names function that returns an unordered list of names. So let's create a function, list of names, which takes people, and inside here, names equals people map. We're going to map the people, right? Person, and then here we can now return a list item with the person name here. And let's close our tag. And then we want to join here. And then we want to return the unordered list, which contains all the names here. Let's get rid of this extra line here. There we go. And since we're repeating some of this information, we could get rid of this names here. And then we could get rid of we could just say main inner HTML list of names. And we'll pass in the people here. We could take this and move it here. There we go. All right. So let's refresh. Oh, so something went wrong. Reference error. List of name is not defined at. Okay, so we have list of names and we are messing up somewhere here. Function list of names people, and we return this, and then let's refresh here. Seems like I probably messed up on these two were not matching. So now we have a list of names. I wonder if we still need this join. Let's refresh. So we do need this join because it thinks it's an array. So let's just get rid of, there we go. List of names, list of names. There we go. All right, cool. So if we look at our elements and we look at our div main, we actually are now rendering this unordered list with a bunch of list items, which before, if we look at our index.html, we weren't doing that here. So great. So now what? We can, if we refresh our page here, there's like a slight flicker that's happening here. And that's because we're making an HTTP request, and those are not as fast as as when we're rendering the page. So if we look at our network tab and we make this actually slower, this is what happens. So a quick fix here is to we could create something like a placeholder, like a loading placeholder, which we continue to use this, and then we'll have a p tag called loading ... And if we refresh our page, now you'll see loading first, and then you'll see the render list. So this is like a nice little UX feature where show that something is happening while someone with like a slow network or connection, show that something is loading and then load it. Cool. So we could probably clean up this file. We could probably change this to maybe get list of names, which is better. We also don't need this fetch promise variable here. So what we could do is we can get rid of this and just connect this code here and get rid of that. Great. So if we refresh, this still works. Cool. We could also, if we don't want to do this function, we could just name it const get list of names equals people. All right, and what else? I think that's about it. We were able to fetch something from an API, and we were able to render some of that information here. And if we wanted to maybe add the age, we could just do something like um, we could do something like name, and then we could do comma age here, person dot age, and let's see what happens. And that works. So this is how you fetch on JavaScript and how you render things. And if you enjoy this video content, uh, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching.